What's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video on F1 2017. If you did miss the gameplay video I uploaded yesterday from the E3 gameplay livestream that F1 did on the Square Enix stream, then do go check that out, link in the description. But in this video, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, I'm going to now talk about my personal experience from some of the career mode aspects that we now have found out have been revealed by Lee Mather on yesterday's stream, and talk about my personal experience, because if you're new to the channel, then you may not know that I actually went to go test F1 2017 early, back in, I think it was March or the end of February, and I've got some personal kind of experiences from things like the R&D system, the brand new engine and gearbox management system, and I've got a way of trying to illustrate it a little bit better to maybe give you a bit of a better insight into what it's going to basically look like, because I understand at the moment there are no kind of screenshots or any gameplay from the actual menu screens of what that will actually look like and how you'll interact with it. So literally, to illustrate it, I've actually just gone out and drawn it on a piece of paper, so forgive me when I try and focus this on the camera, but hopefully this will give you a little bit of a better indication than me just kind of talking and moving my hands around. So if you can sort of see that, hopefully the webcam sort of focuses on the main bit. This is, by the way, not an actual representation of what the R&D tree is going to look like. I'm just going to say that right now, but I've drawn roughly what a sort of tree kind of looked like from my memory, basically. You've got four main pillars coming out, left, right, up and down, and then you've got four smaller stalks going diagonally, each diagonal. So the main parts coming up and down, left and right, will be different areas of the car. So I believe, things like the engine, obviously, one of them I believe would have been, aerodynamics, so downforce or drag, chassis weight, essentially what we had from 2016, the main big sections. But now you'll see they're no longer just, big sections. They're not just 5 different upgrades going along, a line, basically. Now they're kind of actual R&D tree branches that kind of separate out into many, many different upgradable parts of the car. And so each of those will now have different point scores. So remember in F1 2016, each of the 5, as you went along, they got more expensive. And so you had to gain more R&D points. You had to do more practice programs. It meant you had to wait a lot longer to get the points to unlock that. But at the end of the day, there were only 5 for each little section. Now, this means there's so much more things to do. There's so much infinite amount of different ways you can do it, and it means truly a different user experience for every one of you guys, because one of you may choose one branch that goes up here, one of you may choose a branch that goes through there. There's different paths you can take. There's also paths from one section of a tree to another section of a tree, so they're truly a different kind of path you'll be choosing to your friends if you compare it, or even to me or other YouTubers that you watch play this game as well. So it's going to be a truly unique experience in that way for the main tree branches. So each little part, again, will be kind of cost a little bit differently. The first few will be a bit cheaper, and then as you go along, there'll be some huge, massive upgrades where you're having to work quite hard through multiple race weekends to earn the R&D points that are available there. Now, in talking about the diagonal branches, I haven't mentioned those. So the diagonal ones, you can see a lot simpler in look. So those diagonal ones, there are only about 5 slots available for those diagonal ones, and the best way I can describe it is those diagonal branches of the tree will essentially be like team building branches, essentially. So one of them, I remember, I can't exactly remember all 4 branches, but one of the branches was the speed and rate at which your team can build the R&D parts. So obviously, if you choose one of these main tree, like circle R&D parts, it's going to take if it's a small part, it'll take 2 weeks to put on the car, which, 2 weeks, so essentially like 2 race weekends. It might take 5 race weekends, something like that. We saw back in 2016, obviously that was the case. They would say we're building the R&D part, and depending on which part it was, you had to wait at least 1 race weekend or more. So one of these diagonal parts is basically a team building upgrade where you can do the rate at which they build it. So that speeds it up, basically. So there are 5, I believe, there were 5 diagonal upgrades you could do, and those sort of come naturally. It's not something you actually necessarily buy off with your R&D points. It's something that you sort of earn through the career mode. So basically you get rewarded for playing more career mode. So that's a great thing for me personally. I believe, rewarding players who are actually playing the game for a lot longer longer. It's sort of like the similar sort of thing that I mentioned yesterday with the whole multiplayer thing. You know, people who play longer will get better accolades. The people who play career mode longer, invest their time into this longer, will get better rewards and kind of be rewarded with faster R&D parts. So as I was saying, if you were to upgrade all 5 of those speed rates upgrades, basically, essentially, those team building kind of the part of the tree, then that means you're going to get the maximum rate. So that will be the fastest possible way you can build those R&D parts. But then at the very start of the game, you're a lot slower than you were with those 5 upgrades there. I think the other parts are going to be things like the reliability. I think one of them is reliability. So basically it affects how reliable your parts are. So I think like one of them, like down here, will be the diagonal will be basically essentially how fast your parts wear out. So it means you can maybe push them longer in the race. Now, getting onto that smoothly, nice transition onto actual things like engine and gearbox management. So Lee mentioned that you're going to have to actually look after your engine, and it's not just going to be one simple change your engine. It's going to be different parts of the engine. Now, obviously, in real life, the parts they can look at are the 2 MGUs, the MGU-K and the MGU-H. If you don't know what those are, basically the recovery system for the turbo and then the brakes. Obviously, the brakes are basically what we had before in F1 with KERS, but now it's been renamed as MGU-K, MGU KERS, basically, and then MGU-H is the actual turbo, the heat map, basically the recovery system from the heat of the turbo being expelled. Then you have the electronics of the engine, you have the actual ICE itself, the internal combustion engine, and then you have, I think, the turbo as well, the turbo itself, just the turbo part, not the actual recovery part of it, just the turbo. So those 5 different parts are going to be, you have 4 available across this season, obviously, like in real life. So 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 4, and you can choose when you basically select them. Again, I've got a nice drawing of it. You know, it's not the best drawing ever, I'm not going to lie. I haven't done art since A-level, but if I can just focus. So those are like the different parts. That's the gearbox at the end there. I'll get to that in a sec. But basically you have the different parts, and basically you choose which one you want, and you can see the wear rate of them. So like 24%, 54%, and so you can see how you're doing, basically, and you're going to basically be able to have a little bit of a, as it was said on stream nicely, the presenter, I think, said it best, kind of like a micro-managed game within career mode of managing these little parts, and you have to think about it. You have to think about maybe going a little bit easier. So, you know, for me, I'm not going to lie, obviously, you guys know, I like to really wear out my engine. I like to rev it quite high, because I use the engine braking quite a lot, you know, during the corners. So that's going to be something that I'm going to have to deal with. I'm going to have to deal with maybe my engine wearing out a lot more, so that maybe that will be down on power for most of the races later on in the season. So maybe I have to go easy, short shift through gears to maybe make that a little bit easier on the actual engine. As I said, also, one of the team building traits on the R&D tree will be to slow down that wear rate. So maybe that's something you'll focus on, trying to get that team building part of the R&D tree to really get that part of your car well. So maybe if you're a Mclaren, that's something you're going to want to do, or maybe one of the lower teams like Sauber or something like that. And then obviously you have the gearbox as well, which I mentioned, which was the last part of the actual tree. So the gearbox, you know, like in real life, you have a set number of gearboxes, and so you'll get a penalty if you use the gearbox too early. So I can't exactly remember what the rule is. I think it's every three races, something like that. Every X number of races, if you choose a new gearbox within that allocated time, then you will get a penalty. You have to make sure you use one gearbox for what the FI want you to use it for. I don't know I can't exactly remember the number off the top of my head. One of you guys can comment below. But basically, you might get stages where in testing we found, like myself, and actually I think Noble2909 had it, where, you know, I think it was at Monaco or like Silverstone sometimes, we had a gearbox just fail on us, like mid-race. We actually had to drive around with one less gear. And that, you know, in F1 2016, there was actually the possibility to have that, but the probability was so low that it just never occurred. Whereas now, with the actual gearbox wear rate, you can see that if you're going into a race with a gearbox at 88% worn or something like that, you know there's a pretty high chance. So you're taking that risk of having to drive around with one less gear. It could be gear 3, it could be gear 5. It's basically a potluck on what you get. Obviously around Monaco, Harry really was quite handicapped with, I think he lost like gear 4, so that's quite handicapping for him. And I think for me, I think I lost gear 7, which wasn't too bad because I just short shifted from 6 to 8. So you'll get that kind of sense of an actual, oh, it's not a bulletproof car, as I said in yesterday's video. You know, it's actually a living prototype. You know, we always constantly hear that in F1, that these cars are basically prototypes the entire season long. They're constantly getting built on, and they're fragile cars. They're, you know, although they're beasts of machinery, they are fragile as well, and so you do have to actually look after that. And I love that for personally, because it gives just one more element of something to do in the race. You know, it's usually just flat out racing. You just race as hard as you can. Then obviously in 2011 we got the Pirelli tires, so that added tire strategy to it. Obviously that's getting taken away a tiny bit in 2017 because of the natural real life racing, where we've seen there's not too much strategy in the real life F1 anymore with the tire strategy. But now we're getting this extra element of having to look after the engine, the different parts, the turbo, the MGUK, MGUH. Those could also fail on you, so you could have a turbo failure or something. You could have like an MGUH failure, you know, for McLaren, wink wink. So that's another thing to look after. And then the gearbox itself as well. So 2 different extra layers of management there, which is just so awesome, because we've seen back in 2016 with Lewis Hamilton, you know, his engines failing, his, you know, issues with engines. That was a huge part of his season, and now that's what they've wanted to try and recreate in F1 with Codemasters. They wanted to try and bring in that aspect of there is a bit of bad luck involved sometimes with drivers, so you may get very lucky for an entire season career mode, then moving on to the next season you may get unlucky, but that's the exact point of it. You know, you can't really choose that. That's just pot luck at the end of the day of the game kind of randomly kind of deciding that with the wear rate. But obviously the wearing you can help out, but you know, things like random gearbox failures, random engine failures, you can't help that. That'll just be pot luck. But you can also manage the car and not wear out the gearbox, not manage out certain parts of the engine as much. But then getting back to the R&D tree, as I mentioned, once again, just an overview. So much more to do, and it's going to take a lot longer. I believe it was basically, if you would have seen with, you know, people on YouTube, it would have taken maybe 1 or 2 seasons roughly to get like a lower end car as fast as the top cars. Now, not the case. I think I remember back in testing, I think it was Lee or Paul Gilles was saying that it was, I think, 3 to 4 to even 5, depending on how good of a player you are, to get the car from the very bottom, like a Sauber or a McLaren, right to the top. So it's going to take so much longer to do that. So much more challenging, especially for experienced players. I know there'll be more casual players that was fine, you know, 2 years, but there are a load of like more experienced players that found it very fast and too fast. So now it's going to be a lot more realistic in terms of it's going to take, you know, at least 3 if you're really good at the R&D program, but probably more realistically 4 to 5, I would hope, and hopefully that carries over from testing to the full game. We'll have to see. But yeah, they've just expanded it so much more now with the tree. It looks awesome. Like when you open it up, it looks quite daunting, but then when you quickly look into each of the parts of the tree, you can see, oh, okay, so this is logical. So I upgrade this, then I go to that, then I go to this, and it just works. It just works. So yeah, very cool stuff. In the comments below, let me know what you think of that, and let me know if there's anything else from the live stream, what Lee Mathers said, or in the article from Amazon in yesterday's video that you want me to expand on, because I may have forgotten something. So let me know in the comments below if there's any part of the game where you want me to expand on, and I will try and get back to you. I'll basically ask Codemasters if I can expand on the part you've asked on. There may be a few parts that I did play in testing that I can expand on. There may not be. There definitely are parts of the game where we didn't test it back in March, so I can't really talk too much about that from personal experience, but do let me know in the comments below. If you have found this video informative, then hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. Obviously, if there's any more F1 2017 E3 gameplay to come out that I can use, I will be bringing that in a video, so do get subscribed for that. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.